what are the limits that we have as human beings as we face crisis or we face disease or diagnosis and loss? Do we typically use something outside of us, something to change how we feel inside of us? And that's for the most part the old model of reality, but people are beginning to learn how to self-regulate. And when people begin to gain knowledge and information, knowledge is the precursor to experience. And every time they learn new things, they make new connections in their brain. Their learning is making new synaptic connections. So it starts in the mind. It starts with a thought. So as you begin to learn new knowledge and you begin to assemble new neurological structures, the key then is to be able to repeat that information, to review it, to study it, to talk about it. And if you take a group of people and you put them together that are interested in evolving their understandings and creating a better life for themselves, or seeing if their thoughts have some effect on their destiny, that knowledge then is information. And information and knowledge creates awareness, and awareness is consciousness, and you can't have consciousness without energy. So people, as they learn knowledge, they begin to change their energy. If they can review that information and they can talk about it, share it with one another, build a model of understanding, then they begin to fire and wire those circuits in their brain, and they begin to remember that information. So as they talk about it and they build that model, they're installing the neurological hardware in their brain in preparation for an experience. So then when they take that knowledge and they personalize it, they apply it, they demonstrate it, they initiate it in some way, and they do something differently, getting their behaviors to match their intentions or their actions equal to their thoughts, getting their mind and body working together is going to create a new experience. Now, experience then, the beauty of experience is that experience then further enriches the brain. People are beginning to learn how to self-regulate. They're learning how to change their internal state of being without relying on something outside of them. Now, what's the importance behind that? They tend to be more self-reliant, and they tend to resolve issues in their lives without relying on anyone or anything. So demystifying the process since 1986 has been my journey. And I started looking at, after my own personal injury and my own experience of healing, I started looking at other people that had similar health conditions or had chronic health conditions, and they were treating conventionally or unconventionally, and they were staying the same or getting worse, and then all of a sudden they got better. And so I traveled to 17 different countries and looked to see what the commonalities were with these people, interviewing hundreds and hundreds of people that had spontaneous remissions from disease. And it turns out they had four common things. First thing is that they believed that there was an intelligence that lived within them that was giving them life. And this intelligence, of course, is a consciousness, and consciousness is awareness, and awareness is paying attention. So they began to realize that this intelligence that was giving them life was keeping their heart beating and digesting their food and organizing those trillions of functions that happen on a moment-to-moment basis in our body. That body in the expression of life is a miracle in and of itself, and that they realized that they couldn't do the healing, that this intelligence could heal way better than them. So they decided, to develop a relationship with this intelligence, to take time and connect with it, to begin to commune with it, to give it some instructions, to give it a plan, a template, and begin to decide that if they had a relationship with it, if they could be present with it and design some future outcome. And once they were clear and felt good about that intention, that they could surrender that creation, surrender their disease to a greater mind, and begin to replace it with a new idea of who they wanted to be. And that intelligence then began to respond and began to make changes in their health. The second thing that I discovered in the commonalities was that these people all of a sudden took responsibility for their disease. And they didn't say it was my ex that did it to me, or it was the loss of my partner, or my boss is a tyrant and they're the reason I am this way. They got beyond that state of victimization, and they realized that it was the mismanagement of their own thoughts and emotions that created their disease. Now, this is an important moment, because most people have crisis or trauma in their life, and the stronger the emotion that they feel from some condition in their life, more altered they are inside of them, the more they pay attention to the cause. And that's when the brain freezes an image, and that's called a memory. So then people then have experiences in their life from many years past, and they're living by the same emotions, and those emotions are connected to past memories. And for the most part, they're spending the majority of their biological life in their past. So then those emotions tend to influence our thoughts. Those thoughts make certain chemicals for us to feel the same emotions. Those same emotions influence our same thoughts, and the brain makes the same chemicals, and people get caught in these loops of thinking and feeling and feeling and thinking. And so fear, unworthiness, guilt, shame, suffering, pain, anger, frustration, resentment, those emotions are derived from the hormones of stress, and it's a scientific fact that the long-term effects of the hormones of stress really signal the genes to create disease. And not knowing the words that I'm using right now, people intuitively understood that it was their own mismanagement of their thoughts and emotions that probably created their health condition. And those emotions of stress, the stress hormones, in fact, the long-term effects really begin to break the body down. And so they're also very addictive, those emotions, because they give the brain and body a rush of energy. So I started studying stress in very significant detail, because I wanted to understand that what was the main reason for health conditions and disease in our culture. And in fact, it's because of lifestyle. It's not because of genes. And so when people get caught in these loops of thinking and feeling and feeling and thinking, their body is their unconscious mind. They feel the same emotion that's connected to some past experience. Their body is believing it's in the same past experience every single day. And I started looking at the concept of epigenetics. And epigenetics says that genes don't create disease. It's the environment that signals the gene that creates disease. Well, the end product of an experience in your environment is called an emotion. So if you're living by the same emotion every single day, and those emotions are derived from the hormones of stress, in a sense, you're signaling the same gene every single day, and the body's not getting any new information from the environment. And if you do that over and over again, now you're headed for a genetic destiny. So I started to realize the effects of emotional and psychological stress, which are far greater than physical stress or physical trauma or chemical imbalance or chemical stress, that most stressors or stresses end up as psychological or emotional stress. And people become addicted to these emotions, and I realized that they use the problems and conditions in their life to reaffirm their addiction to some emotion. They really look for the circumstances in their life that can trigger that emotion, that it makes them feel something. And just like an addict that's addicted to a drug or a chemical, having the ability to go through the withdrawals of suffering, to go through the withdrawals of anger and hostility and judgment, requires a tremendous amount of consciousness and awareness and a tremendous amount of will. And so these people that began to heal started to give up those emotional states and forgive their past, forgive themselves, forgive the people in their past, and start to take responsibility for themselves. And it was really interesting, because as I was doing the interviews, I also realized that people began to become aware that they were addicted to the life that they didn't even like. And if they were truly going to change themselves, they had to break those addictions and change the view of the way they perceive their life. In other words, we don't see things how they are, we see things how we are. And so there was a strong change that took place by overcoming these emotional states and stopping the cycle of thinking and feeling. And when you do break that redundancy of that cycle, the challenge is that you feel unfamiliar. Things start to feel uncomfortable because you're no longer in the known state. But the redundancy of thinking and feeling and feeling and thinking over time conditions your body to subconsciously become the mind of that emotion, which means then to change is to be greater than your body, the body that's been conditioned to be